Welcome to another episode of Dango Thoughts. This week I'm talking to Taran Gray. Taran is a composer, a musician. Taran wrote several plays. All of them, I believe, got awards. There's a lot of commitment to make the best product by him that I've noticed. And it shows in his craft and music, but it also shows in the way that he talks to you. He's very generous with his listening. But at the same time, when he has something to say, he doesn't shy away from it, which I deeply respect. Taran is such a pleasant individual. He's someone who you really can have those conversations with for hours. I think it mostly stems from the fact that he found what he loves very early on. He got really good at it, and he maintains humility about him, even though he will tell you that he's not that humble. But I do think that there's a humility of understanding of others. I constantly find myself balancing the need to make sense for myself, but also make sure that I'm not actually dancing around a point or not trying to dress something up. We talk about history, music, politics, and human behavior overall. I always learn from my guests. But with Taran, it was a much deeper conversation because I guess we kind of match this level of like we really want to get to the weaves of the thing, and sometimes I feel like people cringe. They don't always want to have certain types of conversations, and I see it as my job as the interviewer to make them feel comfortable to talk about whatever it is that is being brought up. But with Taran, that was never a problem. It felt like we could just keep going, and I really love that. We didn't always agree on everything, but hey, what's a conversation if not to hash things out and truly understand each other, right? If I may share a small point with you before we continue to the episode. I'm still learning about how to conduct this thing. What I find is that it's not always clear to me what is the main thread that binds the conversations in this show. At first when I started, and I keep saying it again and again, I see the show as a window into what people who live their craft do in their lives and how they make choices, what kind of choices they make. Because I believe that each and every one of us can achieve greatness and can achieve whatever it is that we actually dream of. Now, the internet is filled with information of that kind, so it's really difficult to try and steer away from narratives that sound cheesy, because you're trying to explore a thing that obviously many people explore. This is not new, and I don't think there's anything that is groundbreaking about that. But I do think that there are certain nuances that we understand as time goes by that makes certain things in our trajectory as humanity, but also individually, more comprehensible to us. We learn from each other, and by interacting with each other in a certain way, we understand what's possible, both collectively and individually. In any case, that was my rant. I'm excited to create more content for you guys. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Taran Gray. Taran,
hey.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great.
Finally, I get to do this with you.
I know, I'm super excited.
I was chasing you like crazy. For like months, I couldn't get a hold of you because you're a busy man. No, seriously, I really deeply appreciate it. I was very excited about this talk because I don't know if you know, but the whole thing about the show is basically I talk to people who live their craft, who are basically, they are what they do, basically. And I guess my goal, maybe kind of like the distant goal, is to distill some elements or decisions that people like you make in life to what it actually means to dedicate yourself to a craft.
Yeah.
And what does that relationship looks like? Like, how do you grow through the craft? How does the craft grow through you? So I think you're one of the most perfect people to talk to, because I've been a big fan of your music for years. I really am.
Thank you.
I follow everything you do religiously, and there's just something about it that, and this is, as a non-musician, I always find it a little difficult to ask, maybe not profound, but like questions that if somebody doesn't know the little intricacies of a subject, it's more difficult to ask a question that would be on a level that is interesting for a musician to answer, I guess.
Sure.
But on the other hand, I almost find it as, I don't know how to put it, but like, questions that I that you know if somebody doesn't know the little intricacies of a subject, it's more difficult to ask a question that would be on a level that is interesting for a musician to answer, I guess. Sure. But on the other hand, it's almost find it as, because I'm such a novice in the field, it also gives me this little bit of a sense of I'm a little innocent, maybe.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of times I would ask a question, like I noticed, like I would ask Josh, some questions about style and things like that, and some things that are very obvious to him, they're not that obvious to somebody who doesn't do it. So, he was talking about like how even the attack makes such a big difference in style and things like that.
Yeah.
But I guess, thank you, Fridge. I appreciate that. But I guess I want to open with a super simple question. How did you even start with music originally?
Yeah. So I was lucky. I was born into a very musical family. My dad works for a theater in San Diego, and so literally my first memories growing up were adults, putting on costumes and dancing and singing on stage. Like,
they did theater too, or
what's that?
They did theater too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the majority of my dad's colleagues were all theater professionals, and so yeah, growing up, a lot of the adults in my life were dancing and singing.
So you were born into it, basically.
Yeah.
But was there a particular thing you picked up right away? Was it singing or?
I would say singing and performing would be the thing that I picked up on right away, and then shortly after I started taking piano classes, and then it wasn't until probably middle school when I picked up a guitar and then started playing around with that as well.
So guitar was the first instrument.
Piano was the first instrument, but I would consider guitar the first instrument because I never actually got good at piano early on, not until later. Yeah.
But so you picked up keys way later?
Yeah, way later. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say because of music theory in college is why I can play keys now. I couldn't play keys prior.
So it's true what they say, it's supposed to be much more structured, or?
Yeah, I think so. It's linear, it's kind of like, especially on a piano, like it's all set out in front of you, in a very linear way.
So basically you can't even envision like a different trajectory in your life because you were surrounded by that and fell in love with it right away, and it wasn't something that was it was never a question.
It wasn't a question. Out of high school, I wanted to go to college for music video directing, and so that was as far off the path as I ever got.
Still doing music,
still the
just filming
same.
it.
Yeah, but directing. Yeah.
And this is something. So did you ever have like almost like like crises where you were like, maybe this is not the right thing, or never? This is.
No, I didn't.
That's amazing. Yeah. See, that's just amazingly lucky. Like, the one thing I can always think is like, people who I guess weren't exposed in an early age to what they can potentially be good at and love at the same time. They just imagine the amount of things, like you basically start with like all those options.
Yeah.
And you have no idea.
I was given a lot of confidence early on in it, for sure. And that absolutely, obviously, affects a lot of my assurance in what I do.
I don't even know why this is related in my head in any shape or form, but it just came to me. Did you come from a religious family? Or?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I did.
So was it around like church, or?
There was also, it was around church as well. I didn't start getting involved in church music until a little bit later on. It was really theater, earliest on. But then, as I got older and a little more, and I developed my craft a little bit better, I was a little bit better at playing guitar and piano. Then I started stepping in at church and playing around. And then actually for a year, in college, I was a worship pastor at a Methodist church.
Really?
So, yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. First of all, what age was the first time you stepped on stage?
Oh my gosh. In front of an audience or without an audience?
That's a good question.
Without an audience, it would have been a few months old with my dad.
What does that mean?
Well, because my dad is a theater professional.
Oh.
So he's a lighting designer in San Diego for theater. And so, I grew up on his lap inside of theaters during rehearsals and shows and performances. As far as in front of an audience, I think the first time was probably like, I don't know. Maybe that was at church. Maybe around like 7 or 8. I like sang, you know, in a kids choir.
And it felt like you were at home right away?
It was, I mean, I've always been energized on, I'm naturally anyway, I have like a lot of, I'm hyperactive already, but when I get on stage, it's just like, it feels like all of that, like, it feels like I can give all of that hyperactivity that's inside of me, feels like I can give it away to like an audience. And so that was the fulfilling part for me, was like getting on stage and being like, oh, I've got enough energy for this. Like, I can do this.
And how much did the religious undertone played a role in the type of music you were attracted to? Some, like a good mixture of like none at all?
That's a good question. So I guess it's a complex answer. You know, early on, I listened to a lot of, obviously a lot of Christian music growing up. Especially like Christian contemporary, because that was really, really popular.
What's Christian contemporary?
So Christian contemporary is like sort of like, if you remember POD, like or Creed.
I see.
Yeah, that's Christian contemporary. So it's adjacent to pop music, and it's artists who have taken pop music and instead of singing about you know, the material world, they're singing about the godly world,
about, you know, Jesus and everything.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So I grew up listening to a lot of that, and then right around middle school, kind of transitioned out of that and started listening to a lot of mainstream. Like I mean, I clearly remember like, well, actually, first I was a huge Beatles fan early on, but when I started listening to mainstream music, like current music. It was when The Boy Is Mine with Maya and Brandy was on the radio. Santana had just come out with his Supernatural album. Like there was all this cool, like Snoop Dogg had Big Pimpin' out on the radio. Like everything during that time was like so freaking cool.
So it was very eclectic too.
Yeah.
It came from from many directions, and a lot of them became mainstream. So I guess I actually never thought about that, because in many periods of history, I guess there was a set of types of music that was kind of like allowed culturally.
Right.
And the times we live in, it was like, I never thought about it. Like, it's a very different thing, because you have all those different kinds of cultures that have their musical essence come out in some form as a mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting like time, I guess, to become someone who creates in that field.
Right.
Because you have all this stuff to play with. And the stuff that I see from you today, you can definitely hear that there's a lot of, there's some, I can hear like some of those like almost like choir tones.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff when you just fuck around, like like one of my favorite things on Instagram, we're gonna put the link in the description for your Instagram and everything, is where you do this little, you know, the little din, 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 and then you just play with all those different instruments.
Right, yeah.
It's one of my, sure, it's not like, you're not gonna publish it as a masterpiece, but that's amazing because it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Like I watched it maybe like 30 times. Straight up.
That's awesome.
Because it's someone who's just like really good at what he does, and then you take all those elements, and it's silly and fun and amazing, and it actually makes you move, like all of those components at once. And it's not a given that it would be that good, even though it was just like probably something you did like in an evening. Just like, let's fuck around a little bit. So I can totally see how like you were influenced by many things. By the way, do you carry any? And this is not to put you on the spot. Just curious. Do you carry, like, do you till this day you believe in God and?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm. I grew up in a very white evangelical setting, and I don't necessarily associate with that anymore. But I do associate with Christianity in maybe the more biblical sense, you know.
So the tenets of like what they believe, basically.
Absolutely,
Jesus, the Son of God, and that whole
right,
stuff.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And do you feel that do you? So I asked this question, and I think I asked this question of every musician I ever spoke to, and I get a mixed bag of answers. But I would assume that from someone who's driven by spiritual components, the answer, like I wouldn't be, like I think I know the answer, but I will ask anyways. Do you feel that it's possible that what musicians do, in fact, is that they can actually see or hear or feel something that's actually there, and they instantiate it for the rest of us, and that's why we kind of like collect around them to see that thing that we can't see?
That's like, it's funny that you asked that question because I'm a skeptic, like through and through, and so I come by my faith and my understandings extremely through a skeptic lens of not naturally wanting to believe anything, to be honest. And what you're talking about tapping into is actually one of the things that I have a really hard time with in churches, because I still go to church. Obviously, right now we're not in buildings; we're doing it over online because of COVID. But I go to a primarily black church in LA here, and it is hard because of what you're talking about. Like, there's a lot of times where I feel like in worship, I have a hard time differentiating like what is spirit-led and what is theatrics, because I grew up in theater. So I can understand like when a song builds, what that does to an audience. And so it's hard for me to take it honestly sometimes in like a worship setting, because I'll hear like a song build during a worship set, and then all of a sudden everyone's hands raised, and I'm like, well, I love that you're in the spirit of that and that you're led that way, but I also look at it as, well, you did that when the music, as you did that because there was also this element of performance that sort of like brought you to that moment, whether that's ushering them into that moment or whether that's I don't know.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, so are you referring more to like the potentially theatrical component of, let's say, what Pentecostal do, or like like this thing? Because okay, so let's then divorce it completely from church and like Christianity, or even spirituality, and let me ask it in the most secular way possible. Is it possible that there's another space of real information, that of different kinds, that some of us have different talents of tapping into? So like some writers would tap into that, like, the whole concept of the flow, that it feels like you're not channeling it, but it does feel like you're not really doing it. It's almost like you just open yourself and you relax into it, and then it happens. So now, of course, we, according to this kind of like hypothesis in the question, we would still be a component in this process. It's not like we're completely removed from it. But is it possible in your mind? I'm not saying that's how it is. I'm saying, is it possible in your mind? And I always, and again, every time I ask it, I'm trying to come up with a better example or a different one, because I think people are getting, like, if somebody hears me saying it again and again. But the one example I always use, and again, I even use it in different interviews, because I used to still film musicians quite a bit. When I see two musicians or a few musicians doing a thing in a room, and I'm looking from the side, if somebody does one thing in the side, even if nobody's looking at him, everybody else sees in their mind's eye what he's doing. If they're improvising and they kind of connect it, so that tells me that there must be some space, there must be some bridge there, right? That they see what he's doing. And so that's where that question really came from. It's like,
I do believe in that. I do, of course, believe in that higher source. I don't know that I would personally go as far as to say that I am an instrument of that, like that I'm being, like, I would go as far as to say that I am in personal conversations. Like, so I guess for me it's the idea of the loftiness of it, that it happens when I pick up an instrument. I don't necessarily believe that is true as much, because for me it's performance and I'm hyper aware of that situation. For me, I would say it's more true of like when I'm in conversation with people, then I understand that, if we're like in a brotherhood or whatever, like, and we're having a good conversation, there is something there that I think we're tapping into for sure.
So it's like a similar space, some space mind that is similar. I guess that's what I'm referring. And I'm honestly, I don't have like a complete answer to that. I'm always asking people who interact with it all the time to see what they actually think.
Yeah.
Because it's like
It's
in
a
my mind, it's
spectrum,
completely
for sure.
possible that
Yeah.
hey, if you're a good musician, right? And again, because most good musicians actually also tend to be pretty humble, so they kind of recoil from that title. But good musicians, yes, they are making themselves more intricate and sensitive instruments, right?
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm not humble.
Maybe you're not humble. Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm performing, dude. Like that's all me.
So it's all you.
No.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a breath of fresh air. I like it a lot. Let me ask you about relationships. This relationship you have with music. You are now officially engaged. So congratulations.
Thank you.
How much of the depth of your relationship with your craft do you see as similar to the relationship with your current new fiancé?
Wow.
Or is that a completely different thing in your heart and mind?
Yeah. I would, the crossover is maybe a little bit different. I'm gonna kind of take your question and bastardize it. I apologize.
Go on a tangent, man.
I would say that the crossover is that I've found someone who partners with me in both of us, in her craft and in my craft, sort of wanting to become better, and there's a parallel, of like both of us rising to a higher standard because of each other. That to me would be the crossover, within the craft for sure. And then beyond that, of course, she's my muse. So there's songs and songs and songs that come out of my admiration and my love for her. In fact, "Become My Wife" is the title of the one that's coming out. It'll be out by the time this comes out, and that's the one that I'm performing, on this video. But yeah, that's a good example of one of those moments where I was able to write that song in about 10 minutes because there was a flow of like, I know exactly what I want to say about this person.
I guess I'm asking because you know how, let's say you have people in finance, and the caricature version of that is like they're married to their job, so they're like, in this particular case, there might be some that for them it's their craft, and it's just like music is for you. For them, dealing with with hedge funds and things like that. For them, that's that, right? But usually, in order to achieve this pinnacle of achievement in those highly competitive environments, everything else has to suffer. So like the loved ones, the family, right, all that stuff. And I don't see any reason as to why it would be different in music.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like people get really famous and then that becomes a problem. Or
yeah.
So I guess my question was more along the lines of, do you view the space that those two major things in your life, which is your future wife and your life, really, your craft, do they occupy the same space, or there's like a Venn diagram in which they overlap, or they're a completely different thing for you, both of them, in which like they complete a thing in you, but they're not, they never compete. This is not a thing that has to come, I guess that's
they don't, for me they don't compete. I compartmentalize everything. So I do for every one of my relationships have I have everything kind of compartmentalized in my head, and nothing really crosses over. Like at least
that's amazing.
Well, it's amazing to say, but I know from close friends that things do cross over more often than I think they do, and that's when problems arise because I didn't prepare or see that crossover. Like of course I have blind spots, in that vision of nothing crosses over. But as far as sort of how I just run naturally, I definitely do run naturally off of that idea that things don't really interfere with each other.
They don't have to compete. You can actually find a place for both of them.
Yeah, yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. Well, let's. Hey, one can only take example from you. I think me and my girl will actually do a pretty good job at that as well. But I did notice that it's not an easy task for most people.
Yeah.
There's a few that I'm seeing, and luckily it seems like I'm seeing more of that. But yeah, I think like a lot of people struggle with that part.
Yeah.
Which is like, how do you? It's like, do you set yourself first because do you feel like that's your, like your career or whatever it is that you do as a craft, and then, you
Right.
have to still invest so much money, so much time. Maybe money, who knows? So much time with the person that you're developing a relationship with, and I always strive, just like you're saying, compartmentalizing, but not even that. I always strive to make sure that somehow they can coexist in a way that everybody are happy.
Yeah.
And there's enough time for everything, and there's
Right.
enough. Yeah.
I was single for 13 years before her and I started dating. So and I mean, like I dated, occasionally, but never anything serious, never calling anyone a significant other. And it was for a lot of reasons, but I think that's one of the reasons, which is just like I'm determined, and I was holding out for someone who wasn't going to interfere with that determination, who was going to come alongside that determination and like help propel me forward.
What does she do?
She's a content creator, but she used to be. I mean, she's famous, so that helps because there's also not this element of if I become famous, is that going to be an issue? She's actually going to be, in a way, more of a shepherd in that arena if that was to happen. She was on the first 2 seasons of Real Housewives of Orange County.
Oh, cool.
And so that's how she sort of rose to her popularity. And then from there, she moved into digital advertisement and then came back. And now she's a like a social media influencer.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, yeah, no, so that will definitely, she knows how that game goes. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let me ask you this. You're now creating content exclusively for yourself, right? You don't like write songs for anybody else. This is your stream, right?
Yes and no. Yeah, I would put a little asterisk on that.
Okay.
I create only for myself in the music world, and then I'm also in musical theater, and I have a co-writer in musical theater. So then the two of us do the same thing in musical theater.
So that was actually part of my next question.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Taran.
No problem.
Because you wrote how many musicals have you written?
We're at 5 now.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And one or a few of them got awards, right? This is
Yeah.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Our first musical, Freedom Riders, the civil rights musical, won Best Music of the New York Musical Festival. We also got a special award for social relevance. In 1961, a group of young activists who were male and female, black and white, Jewish, Christian, atheist, whatever, they all got together to basically challenge interstate travel because it was in the South, because it was a national law that in the South you had to allow, it couldn't be segregated, but the South wasn't upholding that. And so what they did is they got on buses and basically challenged that law to bring attention to the fact that the South wasn't obliging. And
you said 61?
Yeah, 1961.
So that was way after Rosa Parks, right?
Yeah, actually, a lot of it was modeled off of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was during the Montgomery bus boycott, which was the 50s, and I would say that it's a continuation of that thread. So
basically, it was Rosa Parks created this giant revolution and movement, but then some regions of the country were still not upholding, and then the country needed an extra push there.
So the interesting little footnote on Rosa Parks is that she's actually only one of a few. And is the one that got the media attention, so we give her a lot of credit, which we should. But it was already, even at the time of Rosa Parks, it was already a movement. So she didn't do it on a whim. She actually did it because it was already, there was already a tactic that she had talked to other people about. Other people were doing it as well, and they were going out. So yeah, anyway, that's sort of the footnote on that, which is...
That's actually interesting. I had no idea. That makes it very interesting to actually look into, because I knew nothing about that aside from, the regular story.
Yeah.
Right? So you're saying there was already a movement.
It was, yeah. Rosa Parks
was there, and this is where I'm going to show my very deep ignorance, but that's the time to learn about it. So where do Black Panthers come into that picture?
They don't come in until later. They come in the 70s. So after the Freedom Rides of the 60s, so the Freedom Rides of the 60s were kind of created by two main organizations, CORE, which is Congress of Racial Congress of Racial Equality, and then SNCC. And Stokely Carmichael ended up coming into SNCC, and after the Freedom Rides kind of took over, and he's the one who came up with the term Black Power very famously at a large event. And from there, out of the Black Power movement is where the Black Panthers were erected.
So that was already in the 70s?
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm assuming, did you know a lot of this before, or did you have to study much more rigorously for creating the...
Yeah, I had to study. I didn't know this at all. I didn't even know what the Freedom Rides were.
So this was for the musical that you wrote, basically. You had to...
Well, yeah, we had to. My partner Richard Allen and I had to become historians on this because it was really important to us that we didn't dramatize it, even though it's theater. We weren't trying to dramatize it. We were trying to really create, the history as it was, because the history itself is dramatic and intense enough. You don't have to add to it. And not only that, a lot of these heroes are still living. And so to protect their legacies, we didn't want to butcher what they had done. So it forced us to become historians on the topic. And then that led to our second musical, which is called Bayard. It's about Bayard Rustin, who was a civil rights activist, but he was openly gay. And so a lot of history books have sort of erased him out of the, out of the information because of that. But he was a huge pivotal figure too. And
wow, talking about being in on the receiving end of hatred.
Black and gay. Yeah,
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, black, gay, and Christian in the 50s and 60s. But he's the one who...
What do you think would make it worse if he would be a Muslim?
Yeah. I don't know, though. There's a lot of...
Why was the Christian a problem? Because Christians were...
Well, it's a problem because he's gay. So
okay.
The Christian community, his own community didn't take him in.
Yeah, these people that fight for justice, but then people... like that hold two titles that society ostracizes.
Sure.
It's such it really is crazy.
Yeah.
It's like how many disadvantages you can have just by the placement of your placement in time and culture.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, totally. And I think so. I think historically, in my view at least, I've seen historically that when it comes to Christianity, if I can be super frank about it, like the only thing that Christians dislike more than Muslims are other bad Christians. That
they're doing it wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Because they're like, oh, you're already here, you're just missing this one thing.
Right.
What's wrong with you?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's okay. So you had to do all this research for the first two plays.
Yeah.
And they got. You said in New York they were.
Yeah.
Was it like a Broadway show, or was it like?
It was off Broadway. Yeah.
Okay.
So we did it on 34th Street, just off of Broadway. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you wrote both the screenplay, the music, everything.
I co-wrote the music. My partner Richard Allen was the one who wrote the book. And then I also arranged all the music.
So that's okay. So first of all, I'm really interested in this because I think that one of the most important discussions we can have, and it's also one of the hardest discussions that people now have, is about all this racial stuff, all this, and everything the social warriors do.
Yeah.
And I find myself in a weird position there, like on many subjects. Now I think it's getting a little better. It's looking a little bit more promising.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, when the whole BLM thing started, in the beginning I was like, whoa, because I was born in Russia, I grew up in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I know enough about, what cultures do to notice like similarities in action. And just the way that it was that it was done, and you might completely disagree with me, which will be great because I would love to talk with someone who's also very educated on the subject. There was something that you said that really grabbed my attention.
Mm-hmm.
You said it was important not to over dramatize it because there's enough drama there, but we also wanted to do justice to the heroes that are still alive.
Right.
So you really wanted to capture what in fact was going on, and then give it a theatrical twist that will be interesting, but not biased, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And see, that is something that I guess that's the thing that really it was more than bothered me. It really concerned me that I did not see any balanced discussion or view from either side. It was very, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was a very like thrust here, thrust, which is understandable because it's like when things collide, there's no time for nuance.
Yeah.
But I always said, like, I've seen what was, I mean, I'm very much aware of the Jewish history.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, in the Second World War, like the people suffer more than not suffer more than anybody, but just in sheer numbers, the people who died the most were Russians and Jews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that those systems operated were very similar in a way in which they started from fighting for the good cause that was illuminated by a source.
Right.
And then they were mobilized against whatever that source wanted, which is what I saw. Now, of course, I got a lot of pushbacks from my friends, and especially let me be more specific so we don't get like I have a good friend who called me when the riot started, and I actually happened to be in Vegas back then. I was living with Kelsey for a little while there, but I know for a fact that if I was here, I would do the same thing. He's like, let's go, let's do the thing, let's go. It's very important to support. I'm like, I don't think that this is the right way to go about this. And the reason I said that is because I saw very educated people that I know, people who are their mind is in the right place, hijacked by those very emotional waves, and in the process you saw a lot of destruction. But when you saw what it followed, and they started connecting all those little things that, at least from where I was sitting, they weren't necessarily connected.
Right.
And that really concerned me. So let me ask you a more specific question, because I know I put a lot on the table. Because I saw you were also traveling, and was that related to also one of the places? Because you were traveling and visited
Alabama.
Alabama, right?
Yeah, that was with one of the.
So first of all, tell me what exactly you were doing in Alabama, and then I want to ask you a question. Following that.
Well, in Alabama, we were commemorating the 60th anniversary of the riots, specifically at the location where the writers got attacked. They got firebombed by the Klan, and so we went out to that location off the side of the road and did a candlelight ceremony, and we also went back to the Greyhound station where they were met with a mob back in 1961, and we also did a concert in that station. So
okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, and something tells me that you would not agree with me on this, but I'm actually very happy to explore that. Do you really feel that the situation is pretty much the same like back then?
I think the same. No, there has been there has been some progression, for sure. Like without a doubt, there's been things that have been progressive, but I do think that out of the civil rights movement of the '60s, there was sort of like a pause button that was put on, racial equality and systemic racism more specifically, and then it got unpaused,
And you feel like it was unpaused by what was happening now, for example?
I think it's unpaused by the assassination of people like Breonna Taylor or George Floyd.
Yeah.
That's what unpaused it.
So the awareness rose to... So you don't see how those can be isolated incidents?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So, and this is I'm like hyper aware this is a very difficult subject, but I think it really is
a good subject.
Huh?
It's a good subject.
It's a good one, but it's a very important one to talk about, but it's a very difficult one to talk about because people always assume, like even in the way that I ask questions, I'm always very careful because people always assume motives.
Yeah.
And I don't have time to unpack who I am as a person. And one of the things that arose for me when my friend called me about let's go and do the thing, I realized in that moment, and then later when we talked, he actually told me like he actually never had black friends, and he realized this about himself. I'm holding some racist values. So it's almost like he was trying to exercise on himself.
Sure.
Like he had a demon in him, and he wanted to be like an exorcist on himself, right? And but that came on later. But even in that moment, I felt that something, I didn't know what it was, but something was off about the way that he was talking to me about that subject.
Yeah.
Something not very even. And then I realized something about myself. I realized that it doesn't compute for me. So, we have mutual friends that are of color that I love dearly.
Yeah.
I never thought of them as black people.
Sure.
They're just my friends,
sure.
like everybody else.
Yeah.
And when white people come to me and say, "Hey, we gotta protect them," I'm like, "Who is them?"
Right.
You see what I mean? Like in my mind, it was like there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's the line. That's the line that is the problem.
No, I get that.
You have to define, of course, you want to define a thing if it's going on, but the second you do that, you create more of a segregation, and now it's a vicious circle. Because now you can't talk about this in a way that is human. You're talking about it in terms of black and white, which perpetuates the problem.
Yeah.
So now, and of course, I'm not naive. I'm not saying there's no racism. Of course there is.
Sure.
But I guess my question is specifically. Let's take a specific case, right? I forget the name. You'll probably be able to remind me. The one that happened way later, where actually things were calming down a little bit, and then there was some attempt for arrest, and there was that guy the police officer was pointing the gun at, and literally he was telling him to like lie down, and he wouldn't, and the guy kept on walking to the front. His kids were in the car, and he kept on walking to the other side of the car to the driver's side, right? Mm-hmm. And the police officer still didn't do anything. He kept on like lay down, and only when he opened the door and went in, he started shooting him.
Yeah.
Do you not see what would you do if you would be the police officer?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what else is he doing, reaching for, like, how much leeway? Because the police officer wants to go home in that day, right?
Sure.
So then the larger discussion, like, okay, is he coming from, like, a lineage of those corrupt cops?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's like, hey, but then it's all lumped in the same cases, that's what makes it so difficult.
Right.
Which is, in the end of the day, the police officer wants to go home, either he's black or white.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those cases, also the police officers were black, by the way. So it's like, where do you...
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking, what kind of a discussion can be done on like the largest scale between the people who are actually movers and shakers versus, just people that yap about it on social media?
Yeah.
What form of conversation would you want to see that you think can actually take this forward?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I guess first I would, if I can try to simplify it in the way that I understand it.
Yeah.
Because I was the same as you growing up, where I had a lot of black friends, but but never saw them as black, you know, in that regard. I guess the simplified answer to that is I never saw them as black, but our government has always seen them as black. And so even though I was naive to that, my black friend was not naive to the fact that the government saw him, you know, different. Whether that means flat out racism, or whether that means, you know, micro situations like a security guard watching you in a store more closely than white people, you know,
which feels like, why? I'm just a person.
Right. So that was my naivety, you know, in being colorblind. No, not understanding that that anytime they walked out the door, they were automatically faced with the fact that they were black because
they live in a different reality.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good distinction. Yeah. I take that point.
Yeah. As far as what I want to see, because I do agree with you that you know, cops at the end of the day want to go home, of course, and I think that it stems off of that same concept, which is that we just don't we especially in certain neighborhoods have demonized, you know, black people, predominantly young black men, you know, as thugs or gangsters or as aggressive, you know, and so because we've put these labels of like you're aggressive on that, if you're a cop, you know, and you're in a tense situation and you're coming in with those undertones that were fed to you by society that, oh, this person might be extra aggressive because of his skin color, like that's the stuff that I think is the straw that breaks the camel's back of why a lot of times we've seen situations where, you know, police might reach for the gun a little bit quicker, you know, like in Fruitvale Station in Oakland, you know, during that, or in different moments where if you see it play out and you're like, well, there's, you know, if you didn't see that person, if you didn't go into that situation seeing that person as aggressive, then you probably wouldn't have escalated to that place. So to answer your question, what I want to see, I think I personally want to see two things. I want to see police officers have more training on guns, because they get guns very quickly with very little training. And the other thing I want to see is police become localized. So, which in a way, like, you know, back what it
more
was,
intertwined in the community, and
yeah, so that you know your community, you know the neighbors, and that's going to lead you to some more educated choices, you know.
I agree with both of those points.
Yeah.
But do you think that it's possible that also a lot of that problem is exactly, so I guess I'm seeing it almost exactly like you, only in my mind it's possible that a lot of that stems from micro expressions, not microaggressions. So for example, I always think of this example, if I walk down the street, me personally,
Yeah.
a person who without a doubt have friends from all colors and all shapes, and I really love them. As far as I know, we can all be unaware of things in ourselves. I don't have a racist bone in my body. But if I see a black guy in a hoodie and he's walking funny, I'll be concerned.
Yeah.
But guess what? If I see a white guy in a hoodie walking funny, I'll still be concerned. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's more about behavior, and for me.
Sure.
And I do think that there's we humans. There are components in human behavior that we haven't reached the stage in which we're talking about it or know how to talk about it in society,
Yeah.
and therefore they're invisible to us.
Sure.
So like those little moments where, you know, as time goes by, we invent new terms for new situations and all that stuff, and it becomes more visible because there's a word attached to it, right? And sometimes even those, you know, those ideas become deranged, and like, as far as I can tell, like, you know, safe spaces, things like that, that's a deranged idea, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you agree with it, but that's how I see it. And but I think in the end of the day, and I guess that's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
Is that we educate ourselves more about what it means to be a human, period.
Right.
And yes, 100%,
There are people that are ignorant, that are simply came with those crazy evil biases from home, 100%. But I would say that if you go in most places in LA and you walk into a Starbucks, the percentage of people that would look when a black person walks in and go like, oh, black person, they're close to zero, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess for me, it's like educating people more about what it means. So everything you said is absolutely correct, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
Which is, black people live in this place where they're treated differently just for being them,
Right.
which is horrific, and then they're already loaded. So when a police officer stops them, you can see it in their face, and now this thing begins, right?
I do wonder though, and well, I think I could be wrong, but I think you come with maybe an emotional intelligence in that area growing up in Israel, because I mean I've been to Israel, and there is something to the fact that like you have like in the old city you have the Muslim district, and you turn the corner and you have the Jewish district, and you turn the corner you have the Armenian, you know what I mean? And so you grow up with an understanding that people who are differently cultured than you doesn't automatically equal a fight. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're in a white suburb and all of a sudden a black person is driving through it and gets stopped, that for some people can be way more culture shock, because it's not what they're used to.
So two things. A, because it's too hypothetical, it's kind of hard to put your finger on it, because I would say that it really matters what kind of car they're driving, and it really matters how they look. But that's the same for a white person. And it might be a little less or more, depending on, I agree. But that also plays a role for sure.
But then you get into classism.
but the problem here is that where does it stop, right? So you want to, that's what I'm saying. I feel like we'll never get out of it until we start recognizing that we're all humans. And notice that when you say that sometimes, the people who were oppressed or feel that they were marginalized, they also oppose that because they want that period of everybody recognizing their suffering. They don't want to jump to the place where we're all humans.
Sure.
They're like, no. We've suffered long enough. We want recognition as this different creed who suffered, which you just, as far as I can tell, you're just prolonging the separation. So I guess I would place the separation where unless we choose to see ourselves as humans and we all decide that this is a goal worth striving for, I don't think we'll ever get out of it. And let me just give you my final point about Israel that you said. I actually think maybe as a tourist, it looked to you, whenever we go to a different place, and I've noticed especially Americans do this a lot, because there is a lot of white guilt, either you like it or not, there's this tendency to optimize the situation around you.
Sure.
But the truth is that I've never seen a place with more hatred than Israel. Never. The situation between Arabs and Jews, holy shit, bro.
Sure.
Like, it's like the situation with blacks and whites here is like this small in comparison, right?
Yeah.
This is, we're talking about like, decapitating little girls, like things like that. So it's like, and by the way, this is where my understanding of the situation, or okay, my impression of the situation, that's what makes it different here. Because I know where the road of rah-rahing against something ends.
Sure.
I know where it ends. It always ends in exactly the same place.
Yeah.
I've noticed that the movements who make a difference in the long scheme of things are movements that fight for something. When you're only fighting against something, see what happened with feminists, right? It started as a very necessary thing, but because there was no other narrative but against, when the problem subsided to a certain degree, they kept on being against things. That's just what the nature of the movement.
Sure.
So you don't actually ever get out of that. And what you perpetuate is hatred. Now, it's important. Anger is an important emotion in our private lives, and I think for civilizations as well. That's where you know you had enough, and a healthy amount of anger puts a stop to something that can be very evil, right?
Yeah.
However, it's not the thing from which good things can eventually grow. It has to be a period in which things are kind of like, subside. In Israel, that situation between Arabs and Jews, if we start talking about it, how the media actually twists everything, it's like that's how I saw I saw an exact equivalent there, which is, you know, and by the way, just to be clear, the reason I live here, the reason I moved to the United States, I don't like the Israeli culture in general. I just don't like the condescending nature. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. But I have to tell you that from the most objective point I can actually stand, and I had Arab friends there, it's that as the main operative components there, the ones that actually make the difference, you know, the Hamas and the ones that actually make the actions, they're not the truth is not always somewhere in between. Mm. Sometimes the truth is much closer to one of the sides.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's a false narrative. So like, I know for a fact that, you know, they would like throw crazy rockets for like weeks. Israel wouldn't even respond because it's like, you know, it doesn't do that much damage. Like people don't die because we've built systems.
Yeah.
So, and then they're like, you know, they start going crazy. So they're like, okay, enough. We shoot back. And then the media jumps on it
sure.
and blames Israel.
Sure.
So like I saw a very, very, very equivalent line there between the police and what was going on with the black community there. Mm. And that is not to say that the black community is like making it up or they don't have a rock. Of course they do. However, the way that the narrative was being built, I saw what was happening there. Like it was weaponized. It was weaponized, and I could see that the people who were weaponizing it didn't actually care. And I don't know if it's I don't know, by the way, if it's coincidence or not, but they were also against Israel. Mm-hmm. So like very much against the Jews, like very openly. Mm-hmm. So I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like there's people that in this world that will always want conflict.
Yeah.
And they would find a way.
Totally.
To, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I don't see any logic with what was going on Melrose and on Fairfax.
Yeah.
I don't see any logic there.
Yeah.
With
I mean, you know, there's only so much of that I can speak to, I think, as a white person. But I mean, people are fed up, you know? It's a conflict. Like black people in America has been a conflict for a really, really, really long time, you know? And you would hope that in the modern world that we are, that we're educated enough and that we're also civil enough that there shouldn't still be shadows of that exist, and that's the sad part, is that I think that if you know if you look at it, you know, there are still shadows that exist, and it's those shadows that people
100%.
Yeah,
no, 100%.
And it's those shadows that people are so fed up with that it leads to action. I personally have a very specific tactic within that I adhere to, which is called nonviolent direct action, and it's the same tactic actually that we talk about in both musicals, Freedom Riders and Bayard, and it comes out of sort of the Gandhian movement, and obviously Gandhi got it from Jesus, so it comes out of that, which is this idea that is that you can be direct and you can be actionable, but in a very nonviolent way. Basically, if we can elevate ourselves to a place where we show the oppressor that we are civil, you know, but not only that, if we can also get to a place where we say our oppressor is also part of the system. You know, like white people are a part of the racist system in America too. It's not just black people. You know, white people are also victims of the racist circle. They're on the other sides of it, but they're victims because this really isn't because the attacker isn't ultimately white people. The attacker is ultimately the system that we built. You know, and
or just the fact that, and this is, I guess, you know, I know I'm becoming acutely aware. I love the subject, but it's you know, I don't want to make it all about race. But the reason that I really wanted to talk to you about that is because you spend a considerable amount of time actually studying the history, and you engaged with it. I'm sure emotionally too, because you had to build a performance for people.
Sure.
You said some shadows are still there, and that's what people respond to. You don't think that the shadows are in the fabric of reality? Like, it's not a thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't try it and keep it at bay.
Sure.
You know, and it's a weird quote to pull from, but like in Doctor Strange, when he asked her, "How did you get rid of your shadow?" I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember when they're standing in front of the window, and
Yeah.
he asks her, the master, he asks her, "How did you get rid of your demons or shadows?" And she said, "Got rid of them."
Yeah.
You never get rid of them.
Yeah.
You live above them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's ingrained
Yeah.
in what we are. So to expect when you're trying to purify a thing, I think it's a lack of understanding of what our condition is.
But I think what I'm talking about though is not purification. It's more so just like true equality. You know, because we are at different starting points. You know, between races here. I'm at a different starting point because I won't get looked at shady, you know, in a store if I'm wearing a backpack.
But if you look like, pardon my terms, white trash, yes, you will.
Sure.
Wait, so what's the difference? The difference is not skin. The difference again is what is your general gestalt, right? What's the thing that you?
But a well-dressed, good-looking black dude would tell you he has the same problem as
I know a lot of people, black people who, like, you know, they live a very comfortable life, they dress up nice, and they never experience that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again, this is not to say, see, this is the point where people take it as like, oh, so now you're denying. No,
Yeah.
of course I recognize all that suffering.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that literally, if you want to solve this, not you personally,
Yeah.
like you, me, us, if we want to solve this, as far as I can tell, we can't look at it as far, like, in those descriptions, which is like, hey, if you're black and you walk into a store, then you look, that's not true.
Right.
It's if you're black or you're white and you're dressed a certain way and you emanate certain signals.
Sure.
Now, if you're going to go, by the way, same thing is true of like a white person who dressed nicely and goes into like a really, you know, run-down black neighborhood. You know what I mean? Same thing. So what we want to do is we want to take the majority of people
Yeah.
and have like somehow create a narrative that is more human,
Yeah.
more than anything else. That's the only way I see that is out of it. Really.
I mean, I agree with you. I have seen firsthand, you know, people, black people who look above reproach still get.
You saw that. Okay.
Yeah, in a few times, but definitely the one that's most apparent to me is the one was in New York. You know, coming home from a dinner, I was with a group of actually a group of the people that were in the show, and some guy was like, "It's you guys who are making our neighborhood so loud at night," and we're like, none of us had ever been in it. We're like, none of us are in this neighborhood ever. So what do you mean by you guys? Like, you know, so there is still things that exist, but
Yeah. No, I'm not denying that at all.
Yeah.
I've seen something like that too. I've seen it once.
And
I had a really good black friend, and in a nutshell, we were pulled over. He doesn't look, you know, criminal at all. We were coming back from workout, and literally they pulled us over. Doesn't matter how it happened exactly. For a fact, I'm telling you, we were pulled over because it was black.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
To your point,
Yeah.
To your point with the shadows and with the fact that there's always going to be a group oppressed, I do believe that. I don't believe we ever get to I don't believe we ever reach a goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I believe is that, and this comes from just my faith as well, is that if the commandment that I follow is to love my neighbor, then we never stop fighting for the oppressed. You know, in the same way that Christ fought, I feel like always fought for the oppressed. Like, we never stop fighting for the oppressed. So whoever it is, I'm fighting for more than just black people in America. You know.
Yeah. And I want to be perfectly clear. If there will be for me, the perfect world looks exactly everything that, you know, every person who deem themselves as be like the perfect liberal, that I want equality for everybody as much as anybody, if not more.
Yeah.
Like my dream world is in which that's not even a thing.
I know that
right?
about you.
Yeah. But I know for a fact that people who really care have to ask the real questions from people that maybe see it slightly differently than them, so we can find a path to a real conversation that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Instead of yelling at each other and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's more than I'm asking.
Yeah.
You know, than anything.
I agree.
Let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about the end of time and you know, and God and all that stuff. That sounds fun. Do you think that there's this is going to be fun to torture you with that. Do you think that there's objectively better music?
Oh my gosh! You mean genres?
No, not comparing between genres. Pick a genre. Let's stay in one lane.
Okay.
And then, is there objectively better piece than another piece?
How dare you ask me that question on camera? Whew. Well, yes and no.
Oh, you goddamn it! You and your Hollywood answers.
I know. I can't.
The yes and the no.
I'm too. I live too much in my own beliefs, and also in equality in a way, I guess. I think that we are obviously trained, as a whole. I'm not saying musicians, but as a whole, I think we're all trained on what's aesthetically pleasing. You
don't think there's something objective that is aesthetically pleasing?
I don't think
that we're striving towards where we'll never arrive.
There clearly is, because there's a lot of music out there that I think is awful that people love. So clearly it is objective.
Wait. How is this objective if you're saying that you think it's great and people don't like? That means it's subjective.
Sorry, subjective.
Subjective.
Yeah, subjective.
Okay. But do you think that there's like pools of things that are comparable, and then just simply a different level of this thing? Like why both of those can't be true?
Because I think at least personally, I think
because we need to be humble or
no, because I think we mentioned earlier, I don't know if humility is my strength.
Oh, great.
I just think it's because I think it comes more from being a skeptic. I think that there are moments where we see trends happen, right? And if you look at history, like right now, 90s music is really freaking cool, right? Like it's cool again, 90s music. But in the early 2000s, we all thought 90s music was trash.
Is it possible that all of 2000s we were just wrong?
Yes, that's possible.
but like really, like you don't think it's? I guess the reason I'm asking is because I always see this weird move that people make in art, which is they say there's no such thing as better, and I'm like, there's clearly such thing as better. Like maybe you don't like saying that,
yeah.
But I'm sorry, you're not gonna compare the Mona Lisa with a red dot in the middle of a white page, and if you do, you don't understand art. It's like, no, really, it's that simple. Like the way that I see it, good art is like there's this objective undertone that we're all exploring subjectively, and then some people are better explorers of it. So they can be objectively,
right.
There's some subjective interpretation of it is objectively better in the standards of objective art. And I guess the deeper thought there, and then take it from there, what you think about that. And that's actually not my idea. I read it in a book called The Beginning of Infinity, and that's actually my favorite chapter in the book. I never stop raving about it. It's called Why Are Flowers Beautiful? In which he makes the case that when we reach this level of objective art, which is like, and of course we're still going to have subjective interpretations of it, but we're moving along this line. And he makes one example that is very easy to compare, which some people still don't like, but I think it's not a brainer to see that, which is you can't compare cave art to right. So you just can't.
Right.
And it's objectively better. And yes, for that time, maybe whatever, but that's objectively better because it took more work and knowledge to do. So, and I guess, the point that I want to make, from which I want you to take and see what you think about that higher concept, which is he makes the claim that when you reach that level of objective beauty that crosses this line that he describes as the beginning of infinity, in other words, it means its reach is infinite in potential. So like just like there's knowledge like E equals MC squared that has a pretty unlimited reach to things. Just like that, there might be pieces of music and art when you reach that level that even if a civilization from the other side of the galaxy that is more advanced than you by 2 million years will still see it as beautiful because it reached that level of objective beauty, basically.
Yeah. Maybe this might be a semantics thing.
Okay.
And we might agree. I think what I want to do is what I would want to do is throw in the word craft. Because if we throw in the word craft, then I do agree that craft itself is objective.
Okay,
for
interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you see the difference there? So craft is just the expression of how you bring the thing to be?
I think craft is the education and experience behind the subjective art that you're creating.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get behind that.
Yeah. I remember like in high school, I think, seeing this picture of like through the decades, what was considered beautiful, like the most beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Like through the decades. And I remember looking, if you look way back, like in the 1800s and stuff, like the beautiful woman was like super plump and like kind of chubby. And I remember thinking like, really, that was beautiful? And then because obviously like in the 90s and 2000s when I was in school, like skinny girls were like the rage, right?
But then Roseanne made a comeback to that.
Right. What my point is that we're almost full circle, because now if you look at the sort of ideal beauty, it is like the Kim Kardashians of the Lizzo, like people who are plump, like,
but not like that plump. Like, I know what you're talking about.
But you know what I'm saying, like,
but they're way more plump, right? So it's like,
well, what I'm saying, what we consider beauty now is not the really skinny version of beauty that we believed in the 90s and early 2000s.
So you're saying that it's possible that even the way that we perceive like ultimate beauty now, it's still parochial, like it's still something that might completely change in about 100 years.
100%, without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in that, is there like a mean average? Like, is there a thing that throughout the centuries will rise to like kind of like symbolize the more like perfect place, or you think that's just
they've got 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth?
Perfect. Sold. Nice. Okay. Yeah. No. I agree with you. There's some things that it's hard to differentiate which ones are culturally bound, which ones are like this kind of like objective thing. I guess with humans it's a little harder to say, because humans are pretty much set for a pretty long time as they are, and maybe now with like CRISPR and things like that, we'll be able to like augment ourselves enough and fast enough to then start arguing about whether one horn or 2 tails or what actually looks more nice and symmetric, and like there's this whole, I think there's like this whole porn what do you call that? I guess genre with like girls with like tails and stuff like that.
Oh,
like, like anime and stuff like that. So who knows? Maybe we'll be able to like get to a place in which a girl with a cushion on her head is like the main thing. Who knows? Okay, so now we'll almost solve the secrets of everything. let's move.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. Let's solve global warming. Go.
Too late.
Just fart less. Okay, so as far as I want to explore a little bit your belief in God.
Yeah.
It's you said that you adhere more to like the canonical, Christian belief, and how does that look? How does it look like? Do you spend any time on it? Or this is something that is just humming in the back of your hard drive?
I do spend time on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the picture that you see that you can reconcile also with everything we know or for you also what you see in your life?
In terms of,
is there one? Of course, there's heaven and hell.
Oh yeah.
And what?
Got it.
So is because some of the things, I guess, to me in Christianity that kind of hard to swallow, even if you want to take the rest of it at face value. So, like for example, somebody can murder their whole life, and then all they have to do is to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, and then they just go to heaven. How do you see that, for example?
I have no idea. No freaking clue.
Okay. No, I'm definitely not trying to put you in the corner. I'm wondering if there's, because you're a skeptic, because you live such an interesting life.
Yeah.
I want to see how do you reconcile that, and if you can reconcile it, do those things, do you just kind of put them aside and you just don't dwell on it too much, because it's something that, hey, you can't do everything. So
I'll tell you what I'm a skeptic on. Maybe that helps.
Okay.
Because and the reason, and I'll start by saying, like, I am So my answer was calculated earlier because I am a practicing Christian, but I don't personally want to be associated with the evangelical community because I think that traditionally and maybe culturally they've created a maybe more problems. And I feel like I can say this because it's the community that I came from. We've created more problems than we've created solutions in a lot of situations, I think. And so if I can divorce myself from that and be able to just say I'm a Christian, like in the biblical sense, then to me that's a little more of a blank. That's walking into a conversation with a little more of a blank canvas, as opposed to having all of these other labels attached to me.
Yeah. So I want to be very clear. I'm actually not trying to form an opinion about you.
Yeah, totally.
I'm exploring it because so first of all, in Christianity, there's no reincarnation, right? When you die, you're either in hell or in heaven forever.
Right.
So why do you get to have this one lifetime? It's like, is this like a new? No,
Yeah.
I'm really asking. I have no idea. I've never thought about that.
I'll answer your first question first
Sure.
because I forgot to answer it, and I'm not trying to go around it.
Sure.
The first question was as far as so with the whole idea of acceptance and who gets accepted, really I think that's maybe the bedrock of my belief is that I believe everyone is welcome. I think everyone's welcome. Period. So if you're gay, like stay gay.
Wait, so that means there's no hell?
Well, so this is the part of that is that I do still believe in a heaven and hell. When it comes to that, I think that there's a lot of intricacy to it that I am not going to pretend that I know as a human at all. I purely can go off of the idea that I think everyone is presented an opportunity, to understand and give glory to God, and to go back to your other question, kind of in a roundabout way, I do think that that's why we're given the one life. I think we're given one life to glorify the Creator, and what we choose to
make
do.
Him proud.
I believe we all were created by a God who wants to have communion with us. So wants to be in relationship with us as His creations. In the same way, and that's to be honest, and I've said this as a skeptic, but to be honest, for me, that's a really easy place to come to, because it's the same way I feel about the stuff that I create. Like I want to be in relation with that creation, And so that's really sort of for me what the big picture of all of this is that we have an ultimate Creator. He wants us to be in relationship with Him. He gives us, through Christ. Obviously, because I'm Christian, I believe that it's through Christ that He gives us that access to Him, because otherwise we're a fallen. We don't deserve to be in communication with God because we're imperfect.
But would you then punish a piece of music that you think that is not working exactly how you want it to work?
I would rework it.
So you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't that a little weird?
I see. Well, I see. I can. But yes. But and I guess in my head, I don't see it as punishment for the sake of punishment. I mean,
but
in the same way that
forever, isn't that the belief?
Well, in the same way that a father will punish their child in order to redirect.
But not forever.
No, not forever.
But isn't the belief that it's forever?
You're talking about when it comes to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm having a hard time reconciling. That's not a correct mechanism.
To be honest, that's the thing that I have a hard time reconciling too, though. If I'm being completely honest with you.
Yeah. Everybody should have a chance to rectify or correct what they did,
That's not the, hell is, first of all, the word hell is never said in the Bible. So
Not in the Old Testament, but isn't it mentioned in the New Testament or no?
the idea, the word itself is not, no.
No, okay.
The idea of having, of living in eternity with the absence of God and in pain and torment is, of course, in the Bible.
But that I guess that is hell, yeah.
Yeah. But, we've created a lot of extra, we've kind of filled in the gaps of what the Bible even talks about, with our own thoughts. And that's that part of it I divorce completely. Anything that's not in the Bible, I'm like, you know what? You guys came up with that.
Eternity of suffering.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I mean, you're not answering for the Bible. I'm not.
Well, and but to be honest, that's the part that I do have a hard time with. Like I struggle with that concept because I understand that my part in glorifying God, to go back to that, like what I truly believe is that it's my job to love people, to present people with the fact that I believe that Christ died for us, and beyond that, it's just to love people again, and like that's it. Like and there's the Holy Spirit, who's the other part of this, the Trinity.
Yeah.
And beyond me telling someone, what I believe is true, it's the Holy Spirit's job to do whatever with that, with whoever with that. And it is the part that I struggle with, because the rest of me is just like, I just am gonna love people, and so I have a hard time fathoming the idea of what part does this play where that person that I'm loving might end up not, having an eternal outcome that's positive. That's hard. That is hard.
You can't correct for it.
Yeah.
Because for example, in Buddhism, the cycle is a little more like, it's more cyclical. So it's like, it is very difficult to get out of hell in Buddhism, because you don't have, because karma is consistent of all your past actions, but also your current actions. So you can have like a lot of good karma from past lives, and you can be born with a lot of money or a lot of opportunities. But if you don't utilize that still for what's called the path of forget what it's called, like the ethical behavior, then now you are actually on the down trajectory, even though you had a lot of good karma. So you can burn all your good karma away, and you can actually end up in hell still.
Yeah.
And then from there, the difference is like it's like a funnel, because from there, because you're born into a world of only suffering, it's not conducive for good deeds, because there's nowhere to perform them. And it's very difficult to get out of that cycle at that point. So I guess in that sense, it can also be eternal.
Yeah.
But I guess it's a little bit more cyclical. But all of those stories, of course, in the end, it's not like, I'm asking you because I'm shopping around.
Yeah.
I'm asking you because those components of our psyche, I believe, they're kind of like they're necessary structure.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you have a complete atheist that believes that there's nothing, there's nothing at all, they would vehemently oppose the word belief, but let's say the trust in scientific methods as they are to bring us through, the entirety of time that humankind will exist and the things that we're going to become. It's also, to me, a form of a thing you rely on.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you find comfort in the fact that we have some control over nature, and therefore we're going to keep going. So this is not to say, like I'm not comparing. I'm just saying that still falls, in my mind, within the purview of the things that you have in the back of your mind that makes you trust that something can be relied on, like something reliable that can carry you through tough times, through whatever it is, right? So I guess my question is more to that, which is like, if you take everything that your core belief is based on, I guess you answered the question. Some things you have to peel away because they don't make sense to what you believe yourself to be or what you want the world to be.
Yeah, every religion has a really bad tendency to like other each other. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're here, but those others over there are a problem. You know what I mean? Every religion does that, and that's the part that I am trying to be super sensitive about, not to do ever. Like, I want to take, like, because I mean, Jesus didn't other people. Like Jesus was Jewish, but he didn't chill with Jews. He hung out with tax collectors and prostitutes and was at bar. You know what I mean? He literally made it his intent to hang out with the people that were othered, you know. And the only other element that I think looks different with God, if you look at the Old Testament and you look at all this stuff where you're like, oh, God is punishing and blah blah blah, you know, all that stuff. Like, that to me is just looking at that. To me is more so a story of God trying to make sure throughout history that his story is protected, you know. So like everything from the fall of man to Jesus, like that God made sure certain things happened in order to protect that lineage and so that we could get to Jesus, right?
Why do you think that matters? So like, because if like in the ultimate scheme of things, why does that matter?
Well, that matters because, you know, with Jesus coming as both human and God, you know, Jesus comes as a perfect sacrifice, dies for our sins in order so that we can have communication with God, you know, because otherwise we pre-Christ, we live in an area where the only other way to do that is through the Jewish temple, you know, through the curtain. And so Jesus comes as sort of the perfect sacrifice, because up till then we were doing non-perfect sacrifice, you know, the scapegoat or the lamb offering, you know. And then Jesus comes and is like, I'm the perfect offering so that you no longer have to sacrifice goats and sheep, you know. And so I think that was important because it shows, you know, the importance of that lineage is to show the depth of like not only seeing the divinity of God, of like, this is how I got from here to here, but also to show the distance between God and man, of like this is how far away we are from being able to commune with a perfect power. So,
do you think it's possible you said that it's also about understanding the distance between where we are and where God is, but isn't that distance closed when you die and you go to heaven?
Yeah, totally.
So you're actually with God, or is there still a distance there?
I think, yeah, you're actually with God. I think
that's really like an interesting concept to me. Like if I'm trying to envision it, I'm sure that most people don't, because they think they're not allowed to or not supposed to. I don't know, but that would be an interesting just like concept to explore. Let's say in a show or a movie. Like, what does that mean? Like, do you meet God walking down the street because he lives up the hill, or is he just a presence? Or
I've tried to envision it too. I used to have literal. You can like talk to my parents. I used to have literal panic attacks when I was a kid because of the concept of forever, where it was like you're going to be in heaven forever. I'd learned that in school, and you know, or I mean, in church school, and I had a hard time with that because I was like, what if like forever? Like, do I want that? Do I want that?
You're with Kelsey. My girl Kelsey, she hates infinities and
it's freaky stuff, dude.
I don't know. I love it. I was like, forever. Whatever
it's freaky. It's freaky.
Do you get the same like weird feeling when you look at the Mendelbrot set? You keep zooming in, you know those.
Oh yeah.
Her skin crawls. It's like, turn it off.
Yeah, those are crazy, dude.
It's like, so
the constant loops.
Yeah, that is an interesting concept. So because see, for me, it's like I'm genuinely interested. Like if there's a God, I'm genuinely interested in what it actually is, and I think, I don't know. It's the fact that I actually don't remember where I heard this, but when I heard this, then everything kind of snapped into place. The general idea is this: if God exists, the fact that we can even fathom the concept means that there's some staircase between us and him or her or it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's something,
Yeah.
there's some connection, which means
Sure.
that there's a piece of us that is divine. And I think that people sometimes don't like to think like that because they're the fear of God, of like, I don't want to, be punished for thinking that I'm like God. But like, I think, like my version of it is that if God exists, he or she or it must want most things in the multiverse to reach a level in which they see, again, for simplicity, I'll say him, but like, I mean,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
They see him in themselves. And like, that's the
Yeah.
only way to kind of, I guess, remedy like the bigger
Yeah.
things in the world, right?
I don't disagree with that at all. I do think that humanity has to have some divinity to it, right? I mean, from a Christian perspective, I'd explain that in a different way, but it would mean the same thing. It's the idea that we're created in his image, and so of course, if we're in his image, there is some sort of a divinity involved in that. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, like, well, if you like accept Christ into your heart, right? So there are Christians who have, and again, this is something where I think maybe they've taken it a little bit too farther than what the Bible actually says. But I do think the majority of Christians believe that that they hold God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit inside of them. That they have made themselves a temple to receive and to allow that Trinity to dwell within them. So of course it's the same thing you're saying. Like, of course there is divinity within humanity involved within all that, for sure.
Okay. So first of all, I'm so happy that we get to do this, and I'm fascinated by the conversation. So
Likewise.
I'm going to ask a few more questions that I think they're important. Then we can wrap it up because it is getting late. I can do this actually for quite a few more hours, but I want to be polite. I want you to talk to me a little bit about this mini campaign that you did about anxiety and all that stuff, because I think it's such an important.
Yeah.
I really think it's such an important topic, and not a lot of people. I mean, I guess some people do talk about it now, but this is, first of all, how did the idea come to you? I'm assuming personal experience, but then what made you decide to do something about it?
Well, the politically incorrect term is that I'm a hypochondriac. Now they call it health anxiety, but I think more when I say I have health anxiety, people are like, "What's that?" And then I'm like, "I'm a hypochondriac," and people are like, "Oh, okay, I know what that is," So I've always been that way ever since I was a little kid,
So in the pandemic, you were like, psh.
Well, yes and no. We'll get there, because that is where this kind of is fulfilled in a way. But yeah, I've always been afraid of my own body my entire life. Like, I've always, anytime that I hurt or feel something weird, or my eye twitches or whatever that is, I'll automatically
Assume the worst.
Assume the worst. It'll be catastrophe in my head, totally. And that goes beyond just me too. That's also for people that I care about. Like, if someone is sick or something, I always assume the worst too with them. That the worst is going to happen. And I've gone to therapy for it when I was a kid, and then dealt with it all the way through high school. Had panic attacks because of it, and then I would say it disappeared for a long time. And then 2 years ago, I had a really, really bad panic attack in January of last year, and I didn't even recognize it because it had been so long since I had it. I didn't really deal with it since, on a serious level, since high school, and so I didn't know what it was. I thought I was dying, like I thought I was terminally ill, and it was very real to me. It turned out to be a gluten intolerance of all things, but to me it was terminal illness, and like I was dying, and I couldn't socialize. Like, it was really, really bad. And coming out of that, you know, one of the things that I did in recovery for that was a 30-day song challenge, like write a song a day for 30 days straight. And it was super, super therapeutic. And actually two of the songs that ended up on my album came out of that.
What's the name of the album?
The name of the album is The Elephant in the Room. And basically what ended up happening was, that was in January. The COVID hits in March, I think, is when it gets serious. And that's right when I was feeling like at my best coming out of it. And I should say, when I say at my best, I still struggle with it. Even today, I'm like, am I having a stroke because my eye's twitching? So I'm still struggling with it. It's just not. There's certain moments that are very compressed in how hot it feels. You know, the pandemic hits, and in my head, I start seeing not in my head. I start seeing a lot of people that are dealing with health anxiety all of a sudden because of the pandemic, and I personally believe that if you go through something, then you're meant to use that somehow. And this was an opportunity where I was like, maybe this will resonate with people, you know, that I've been dealing with this my whole life. Maybe people won't feel so alone. And it's not what the album isn't. It's not a survivor story at all. It's literally just more of a call to action to be like, hey, like if you feel this way, just know that you're not alone in it. Like, it's not a survivor story because I haven't finished surviving it yet, right?
It is annoying when people automatically, you tell them a thing and then they try and like give you like a good advice to try and solve it. But I'll proceed to do exactly that. Have you ever tried mushrooms?
No.
You might want to actually look into that.
Yeah.
No, seriously. Like it's, as far as therapy with stuff like that, and now actually clinically studied heavily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mushrooms, dude, they keep finding out new things about all different kinds of mushrooms. Like that every time I look at the news, it's like some mushroom they found is...
Oh, I'm talking specifically about magic mushrooms. They found in like, if I remember correctly, the data so far, which is pretty solid at this point, with heavy addictions, for example, which are... I actually don't know a lot about the real psychological and physical underpinnings of what causes hypochondria.
Yeah.
But as far as things that are hard to cut, so like OCD, heavy addictions like alcohol and tobacco, like cigarettes, those are like very difficult ones because people have been doing it for 20 years. It's very hard to kick off. It's, if I remember correctly, it's as crazy as 80% of people who go through 1 to 2 sessions, of course with a therapist and everything, 80% completes the session.
Wow.
So,
Dang.
like for real.
Yeah, that's
so
nuts.
like anything that has to do with concern.
Yeah.
Because like from an anecdotal perspective, it's what they're really good at is... So what they do, like if you look just from a neurological perspective, they shut down a lot of the activity in the DMN, in the default mode network, which is responsible for anything that has to do with self-recognition. So my thing, anything related to me, right? And they show that when that region becomes hyperactive, it also releases a lot of cortisol. It's correlated with production of a lot of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. But there's a lot of other mechanisms.
That makes a lot of sense for my life.
Yeah, no, that's just how it works. And what they found, who spearheaded all this research was Richie Davidson, who did studies with mindfulness meditation for 30 years, and at this point there's over 500 papers by him and et al. Friends. With functional MRI, so like real like controlled studies that shows that what meditators seems to be really good at is turning off the default mode network.
Wow.
Then he added psilocybin to the research about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And he showed that psilocybin does a very similar thing just for you without even knowing how to meditate.
Yeah.
So yes, there's like, risks like in everything, but if you collect the data over decades, They tend to be very gentle with newcomers. It's a weird thing. It's
Yeah.
almost like they're a real entity.
Sure.
But they're very gentle with. I actually don't know of any case in which they kind of like
Yeah.
attack somebody.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so something
Yeah.
to really look into. Like
Yeah.
with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah,
In a
yeah.
controlled environment.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You can actually talk to Kelsey. She's never done that, and we did it one time, and she was just like, "That's crazy." Like
Yeah.
it really brings those nervous levels.
Wow.
And it stays that way for quite a while.
Wow.
So something to look into.
Yeah.
Just
yeah,
in
yeah.
general. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Um,
Yeah, the album is called Elephant in the Room, or The Elephant in the Room, and it's on every streaming service. It's called The Elephant in the Room for two reasons. One is that I'm addressing the elephant in the room. Three reasons. One is I'm addressing the elephant in the room, which is mental illness of a degree. I'm not saying I'm extremely mentally ill, but I am
look
talking
pretty
about
crazy.
mental illness. I'm pretty crazy. Yeah, I'm pretty freaking crazy. The other two things is feeling like the elephant in the room in those situations when I'm really feeling like a hypochondriac. I do feel like I'm sort of like sticking out in a way. I'm not able to find myself in a flow, socially.
So that
in
let
those
me ask you
moments.
about this. So,
Yeah.
so this means anxiety in general, then, not just the.
But
Like
not-
what
but
you were
not
describing
social.
is okay, but social as well.
not social as well.
Okay.
So I don't struggle from social anxiety.
Okay.
I do struggle from health anxiety, which if I'm around, like it can happen at any time, is what I'm trying to say. So like I can be in the middle of a club, and if I start feeling like I have a heart attack, I'm automatically in anxiety mode in the middle of that club and no longer able to sort of function. Yeah.
Did it ever happen to you on stage?
No. Yeah.
So that's a safe space.
That's a safe space, and I know it's a safe space. The other safe space is working on music. It never
Creating.
happens working on music. Well,
Yeah.
and I think because of that, I'm a workaholic.
That's a nice escape. Hey, not bad.
Yeah.
We're definitely gaining a lot from it.
The last reason it's called The Elephant in the Room is when I was a kid, I would always say what ifs to my parents. What if I don't wake up tomorrow morning, or what if this headache is something more serious? And their response was always, well, what if an elephant fell through the roof right now? Basically to say to me, like, you can say what ifs, but what is the probability of this actually happening? Anyway, the elephant falling through the roof would put the elephant in the room. So that was sort of, it felt very, it felt like the right
cool.
title.
I like that. Okay, so this, and it streams everywhere. Spotify, but YouTube as well?
Yeah, YouTube as well.
How does it work with YouTube? It's behind a paywall on YouTube? How does it work?
No, you can listen to it for free. You just type in Taran Gray, The Elephant in the Room, and it'll probably come up. I think it's put out by CD Baby that puts it out.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And this, so CD Baby is what, is the label or?
CD Baby is the distribution partner. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so but it's not a label. It's
Right.
like, how does
Not a
that
label.
work? It's just.
It just works that basically I stay my own label, and they, for a fee I pay them, will distribute my music to all the
Okay.
yeah.
That's probably the smarter way to go, because a lot of musicians really kind of sell their soul to Satan. It's such a weird model. It always blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that the money that the label gives is only a loan. I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. That is
Isn't that
insane.
nuts?
It is nuts. Yeah.
I don't understand what
Labels are banks with contacts. Music
That's so
contacts.
crazy.
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you never went with a label because of that.
I used to work for labels, and then I left.
And this is a little
Way
erratic, but I'm trying to cover the things that I really wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
So the last musical that you wrote was it relatively recent or?
Yeah, we wrote two musicals during the pandemic. One was called Legendary, which is sort of a female rock inspired by Fleetwood Mac musical, but in the modern era. And then the other one was we just finished doing a reimagining of The Princess and the Frog, the Disney version, where we wrote the original movie had 8 songs. Now our show has 18 songs. So we wrote 10 new songs. Richard, my partner, rewrote the book, and we presented it as a where you donate and everything. We presented it as that, on Clubhouse, the app.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is the musical?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, so the musical ran on Clubhouse?
Yeah, the musical ran on Clubhouse.
How does that work? You just
We
listen.
Yeah, we raised money. We bought everybody Monocaster systems so that they could plug their phone in and still have a professional microphone. We rehearsed a ton and then presented this full, audio musical. It was just audio only, and we had sound effects and music and all that.
So it was kind of like the radio back in the day where everybody kind of held it together.
100%.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Wow. Can we find it somewhere?
No, so that was that unfortunately was just for that moment. We do on our socials, Alan Gray Musicals is our social handle, and we do have a lot of videos from that we posted onto there.
That's
but
amazing.
The full
I
thing
actually really want to check that out.
Yeah.
How you said you guys rewrote the story somewhat.
Yeah.
How much did you guys depart from the?
Well, the characters are pretty much the same, but that's about all that's the same. We departed
There's
pretty
some
heavily.
Super Mario characters.
Yeah, we departed pretty heavily. Yeah.
That's interesting. I always love seeing new versions of an old story.
Yeah.
Because I think that the whole idea of creative endeavor is innovation.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something magical about watching a classic of any kind. But I think it's super important that we keep, I think we respect masterpieces more.
Yeah.
When we build on top of them.
It's the Disney model, Almost all of Disney's, musicals or movies are built off of classic fairy tales. So they did exactly the same thing. They took.
Oh, I never thought about
Yeah.
that because it's like there's a slight twist there. It's not
Yeah.
exactly the story, right?
Right.
I never thought about that.
So we almost Disney basically.
That's really cool. All right. So final thing that I want to touch on is what do you think is the future of music? There's this, and I'll of course I'll make it a little bit more specific.
Mm-hmm.
What's the future of music? There's a lot of talk about that. Pretty much everything is going to become more electronic.
Yeah.
But you can still see pockets and waves of things that people are actually trying to go back a little bit more. It's rare, but I do see it sometimes. People are trying to do things in analog, and I think I personally, who am I, right? I'm not even a musician, but if I'm looking at the trajectory of what things are doing, that's just cute.
Yeah.
Right? Like the way that I see it. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But do you feel that there's always going to be some kind of a merger between things? But as far as the music that is the most consumed by most people in the world,
Yeah.
do you think? Because in Europe, for example, it's a very different thing, right? They're much more like electronic based, right? We have a little bit more rock still here, or I just have a completely off picture about the situation?
I think you're right.
What do you think contributes to that? Is that like what is it culturally in America that keeps loyal to this more instrumental medium?
When you say that, you mean like rock and roll?
Rock and roll, and even in R&B, like it seems like, well, I guess no, in R&B they do use way more electronics, right? But there's less of this kind of like what Americans, I guess, would think of as like more robotic, like electronic.
Yeah.
There's less of that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's just a cultural accident? And then if so, can you point to something culturally that you think contributes to that? You might not have an answer at all, but I just wonder.
I mean, my answer would be that rock and roll and the blues are as American as apple pie, so apple pie never goes out of style.
So you literally think it's always going to stay?
I do, yeah. I think it's deeply American. Rock and roll was birthed here. The blues were birthed here. So I think those things will always hold court in mainstream music.
Weren't the Beatles responsible quite a bit for the way that rock and roll kind of?
They were responsible for the wave of British rock and roll for sure. But the Beatles were inspired by American bands primarily.
Okay. So this is something that, okay. So you do think that we're going to stay on this channel for quite a while?
I do, yeah. I think it's one of America's best exports, for sure.
And this is a medium you love to play in as well, or do you try and experiment more with electronic?
No, I do play in it as well. You know, I'm these days I find myself a lot more in musical theater, but for myself as an artist, I do sort of play in the realm of rock and pop. And it is an area that I'll continue to play in. You know, it's for me what feels authentic, you know, to me as an artist. And at the end of the day, I'm just a huge music nerd, you know, and a history buff. And so I love taking all those elements and becoming a part of history in a very small way by taking those elements and creating something new with it, you know. To answer your question about sort of the future of music, I have a pessimist view and I have an optimistic view, and they're two totally different views.
That's perfect.
My pessimistic view of the future of music is that the more it becomes accessible for everyone to create, the more it becomes, the less it becomes a profession. And the more it becomes just an expression, you know.
I never thought about that.
So that would be my pessimistic view of the music industry in the future, is that it becomes something almost like oral storytelling, where anyone has the opportunity to do it, and there's no value held on it, really.
But you think that people would listen to everyone? That's not feasible, it seems.
I mean, I think people already do listen to everyone, you know.
Really?
I mean, not, you know, on micro levels, you know, but if that only, you know, as social media expands and as our connection to each other globally expands, I think that only becomes more saturated.
But you don't think that at the end of the day, they might be listening to everybody talking on social media, but they still listen to Joe Rogan. Like, they still listen to so like even there, right? So I would assume with music it's much more so, because it takes a long time to really become that good. And even though that you're right, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to create with probably AIs that do most of the work for you. You would still have a level of professionals with that AI that regular people would never be able to reach, because they don't have the training to kind of think on that height. Right.
I'm not saying that artists won't exist. I'm just saying that like the level of sort of the intensity that comes with that is becoming less and less. Like you know, the trend that I've seen historically is that, like, even 50 years ago, you had superstars, right? Like, you had, because music, recording an album was way less accessible to people, and because of that, you had way less choices, and because of way less choices, you had these people who were more special in a way, you know, because they were one of the few choices. They were the cream of the crop. They were the ones that were getting the album, and they rose to superstardom. I don't think we're gonna see as many superstars rise anymore as
so
we did.
I see the same thing with, I always say I see it with Hollywood stars. You don't really have that era anymore of like mega Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
That era is kind of like gone, because I think everybody knows to a certain extent, to the most minimal extent, what it's like to be exposed to a lot of people watching you, or you think a lot of people watching you at least. So it becomes a little less special. But do you think that they still think that requires a certain amount of talent? So like,
totally.
You think that the Michael Jackson is no longer possible?
Well, the pessimistic side of my brain says if we've already seen that trend where we've gone from superstars to less superstars, then you can take that and project the future. You know,
but it
the
also
pessimistic side of my
brain. It might be a dip too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
If we start like making music from Mars,
right?
You know what I mean? It becomes this like the biggest stars of Mars or the biggest stars of Earth.
Right. The optimistic side. The optimistic side is that, and this is me just being a history nerd. we live in the age of the single right now, right? Like you don't have to buy a whole album to listen to one song. You can go out and put it on a playlist and, only listen to that one song. So if we live in the age of the single, in my head, I'm thinking, well, at some point we're probably going to return to
the 80s one-time wonders kind of thing.
Well, I think different. I think we're going to return to the 20s and the 30s. We're going to return to the time period where the single was where the superstar was the songwriter, right? So you had Gershwin, you had Leonard Bernstein, you had all these people who were songwriters, and so you had songs like "Fly Me to the Moon" is a great example. Like "Fly Me to the Moon" was sung by Sinatra. It was sung by Tony Bennett. It was sung by Sammy Davis. Like everybody sang that song, right?
Who wrote it?
That's a good question. I don't even know.
See, but you said they were the superstars.
I should know.
But were they the superstars when they wrote the song?
Well, my point is that their song was, right?
Okay, the song itself.
Right.
That's a cool idea.
That's right. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen, is that we're going to enter this new era where we go back to like hearing like Beyonce might cover it, but Nine Inch Nails might also cover it. Bruno Mars might also cover it because the song's so fucking cool that everybody is singing it. You know what I mean?
That's a cool concept.
It's a concept that's already existed in American history.
Yeah, I haven't thought of that.
And everything in history is a cycle, right? So at some point you always come back to the same thing historically. That's always like everything is.
But it seems that even then the song was just another star because Frank Sinatra was still a mega star, right?
Uh-huh.
So was Tony Bennett.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not as big, but it's still enormous, right? Or maybe were they pretty much?
Yeah, they were big.
But the song was also
right.
But it's not like it reduced their stardom.
No, but their stardom was different, right? Their stardom was built off of their interpretation of songs. Their stardom wasn't built off of them as a brand and as a catalog.
But they didn't have their songs. You didn't have Frank Sinatra's songs.
You still did, but they weren't as popular as the
really?
"Fly Me to the Moon," "I've Got You Under My Skin." They weren't as popular as the songs that were sung, at the time by everybody.
Like that, yeah.
And so
I actually didn't know that.
And so it's just I think it's interesting to think about the idea that at some point musicians become known again for their interpretation of a song, as opposed to having to always bring a new idea to the table in the structure of the song.
But now that I think of it, even in the 80s, the one-time wonders phenomenon, which there was a lot of, it's kind of like that. I guess we just called the band one-time wonder, but really what happened was that the song was the hit.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. The band, maybe one band covered it and owned it, so there was no permission for other bands to play it, but the song was the star. It was, I guess, the same thing.
Right. And they didn't cross over,
because they wouldn't allow, because of like all kinds of copyrights, and they wanted to make the majority of the money.
They say that. I think they wouldn't allow it because they wanted to make album sales. And if I wanted to buy "Never Gonna Give You Up," by Rick, then I had to buy the whole album to listen to that one song.
Oh, I see. So the one song speared the way for the rest of the songs.
The one song speared the way for the album sale. They knew that they could make $15 off of us to buy the whole album just by selling us one song.
Because
and then all the rest of the songs were fillers.
But I guess I'm thinking about it more from like a holistic perspective. Like over time, the songs that people remember even today, nobody remembers what album it was from.
Right.
And most people don't even know what band played it.
Uh-huh.
They just know the song.
Right.
So I think in that regard, the song is still the eternal thing. The song is the meme, right? And then the rest of it is kind of just like...
unless you had an album that was, iconic from the top to the bottom.
Well, okay,
like,
but that's
like
different.
Dark Side of the Moon, or
Okay, but Pink Floyd is a household name. Like Pink Floyd is again. It's like And there, oh man, we should have another conversation like that and explore a little bit more of like the history of music. Because I would love to see what you think about my very, very limited taste in music and like my little adventure with it. it's always amazing to me that I never really took the effort to really dive deeper into that. I love music so much, and I even had the opportunity to actually learn from an early age, but I think whatever the reason is, that never happened. But it always, like my sister has 2 little ones now, and they're amazing, my nephews, and I keep pushing her to put instruments in their hands, because I see the dimension that it adds to the mind,
Sure,
and to thinking in general.
yeah.
I've never met a boring musician.
That's funny.
Not once. I've met assholes
Yeah.
and crazy ones,
Yeah.
but never boring.
Uh-huh.
That's a fact. So there's
interesting.
something about think about it. It's because you have to think. If you want to get extravagant here, but like you have to think creatively, mathematically.
Yeah.
Because those are mathematical patterns, but nobody thinks of it like that, right?
Yeah.
And but those are real aesthetics in nature. I always give this example, and we can close with this because I know we're getting tired. But like what is it called? What is it called? Somophone? The plate that you vibrate with sand on it, you know what I mean? And then it creates like all those shapes, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I always forget what it's called. But when you vibrate at a certain frequency, it creates a certain structure, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then you go up in frequency, and then there's chaos, and then you go to a higher octave of frequency, and it stabilizes in a more complex shape.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very old experiment, and people got bored with it, but think about what it means. It means that this structure, the information how to hold the structure, is in the frequency itself, in nature, right? So that's kind of like my question to you back then was also coming from that place.
Sure.
Which is like maybe those things actually, like you see those structures, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then because of that, the mind has to expand to this new level of understanding, because it involves not a theoretical understanding of the thing, but what it actually feels like to play with those structures that probably exist in nature.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
And because of that, like I literally I've never met a boring musician.
We'll have to talk again sometime, because there's a whole other aspect to this. But I do have a strong belief that in modern science we have focused on the science of light, and in ancient science they focused on the science of sound. And because of that, there's a lot of things that we've lost along the way in understanding. I do think our understanding of light is way more advanced than our understanding of sound.
Or maybe just like we might not have lost, but we just maybe maybe we're a little behind. And we might still catch up, because eventually I'm sure that we're going to have to explore all frequencies.
I say lost because I think that ancient civilizations created things with that science background that we.
Oh, this is a conversation I would love to have.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. We're gonna have so much fun disagreeing on that. It's gonna be great. I don't know if anybody lifted rocks to build the pyramids with sound, but we'll find out.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, I know.
We'll talk about it later.
Maybe they use the lemons as batteries. No. But this is a fascinating conversation. Taran, I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this. I know that you have a lot of things to do, and I learned so much from this conversation, and this is something I would definitely love to repeat. So let's find another time and repeat this when it's done that late.
Thank you, Danny. I agree. We only scratched the surface for sure.
Definitely, we're gonna start with Pink Floyd, specifically "Dark Side of the Moon," or "Shine on You Crazy Diamond," which is my favorite song. Taran, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A lot, brother.
Likewise. Back at you.
Hell yeah, man.
I never followed all the rules of love. I've been too stubborn in the past, but every time you look at me, I feel something, and I want to make that last. always waited for the one to come. 'Cause you are stubborn through and through. Well, maybe it's a sign that we are meant to be. 'Cause I've been waiting for you to. Let's be a stubborn, nasty bunch. Let's live out loud and we'll paint this town and burn it all down tonight. If you become my wife. The two of us, we have a way of dreaming. We're always living on the edge. And if you take my hand, then we have good company. And never backing off the ledge. Let's be a daring, crazy pair. We'll live out loud and we'll paint this town and burn it all down tonight. I've never felt so sure of anything else in my life. If you become my wife.